The GameCube sucks to collect for. Now let's get into why. Hello everyone, I'm Critter Alex. I have over 1,300 games. Today I'm just going to be going over the consoles that I do not think are worth collecting for in 2024. This video is mainly dedicated to people new to the hobby. If you're already in deep, you're going to do what you want. I collect for all these consoles, if that's anything. So yeah, I'm not saying never collect for these consoles, but just if you're new to the hobby, maybe avoid these. I'll be using a few criteria, but in the interest of time, I'll just get into those as they become relevant. Actually, I want to address this at the beginning of the video this time. I'm sorry, I'm sweaty. I have to close all my windows to record these and it's hot and my apartment has no AC, so that's why I'm sweaty. For now, like and subscribe. I'm going to be making more videos like this, tons of reviews, video essays, everything video games. I'm going to be talking about it. Come along for the ride. Getting right into it, the first console you should not collect for in 2024 is, of course, the GameCube. The GameCube seems to be the console that gets a lot of people interested in retro game collecting, which it's awesome that it introduces a lot of people to the hobby. But in reality, if you start off collecting for GameCube, you are just setting yourself up for disappointment. First off, the GameCube was kind of the selected console of its generation for everyone to collectively be nostalgic for, which made the prices go way up. Everybody wants a GameCube now. Everybody wants GameCube games. It didn't sell that well originally, so obviously just supply and demand. Those games are going to get really expensive, mixed with, YouTubers saying, hey, buy this game. This game's super rare and super weird and super obscure. Everyone's going to go buy it on GameCube. It's going to get more expensive. That's just how things work. Now, like I said, I do collect for all these consoles. I think the GameCube's cool. It has some pretty cool games on it. But honestly, for as expensive as a system as it is, it's not proportionally cool to how expensive it is. We'll get into some consoles that I think are proportionally cool to how expensive they are. The GameCube is not one of those. Also, any third-party games for the GameCube that were also released on PS2 and Xbox or even Dreamcast, they're always going to be most expensive on the GameCube. And they probably run worse and even maybe look worse on the GameCube. So yeah, it's just not a great console to collect for. It's very inflated price-wise. Now, the next console that you should not collect for in 2024 is the GameCube's good friend, the OG Xbox. I think the OG Xbox is super cool. It's so, people seem to understand what I mean whenever I say this, but it's just so green. It's such a green and goopy console, which is sick. I love that just 2005 gamer aesthetic. It's so fun. I say don't collect for the Xbox for a different reason than the GameCube. It's not that expensive. It's a little bit expensive to collect for compared to some other consoles, but it's not that bad. Ultimately, what it is the Xbox was just a very advanced machine at the time, and because of that, they shoved a lot of hardware into that box. I was going to say that little box, but OG Xboxes are giant, and they're all breaking. Every person that deals with retro games that has been around OG Xboxes has acknowledged OG Xboxes are all breaking. Their hardware is just not lasting much longer than this. I'm sure there'll be a solution in the future to playing Xbox games or even just an easier way to restore old Xboxes, but for now, it is a pretty hard console to upkeep, maintain, and find in good working condition. So I'd say OG Xbox collecting for it's not worth the headache right now. Next up is every Sega console. Unfortunately, I love Sega. I'd say, eventually you definitely should look at the Sega consoles, but Master System, Genesis, Saturn, Dreamcast, Game Gear, all of them have issues, so we'll get into all of them. First off, the Master System is one of my favorite consoles to collect for. It's really cool. I love the Master System. It's so unique. It's so overlooked. It is the console they play in regular show, which is also just a fun fact. It's not horribly expensive, but it is a lot of paying $50 for an 8-bit game, which if you're, somewhat of my ilk, you probably don't want to do that. I'm weird, so I do want to do that. But if you get into retro game collecting and you think it's all paying $50 for 8-bit games, I feel like that's going to scare you off. So do not start with the Master System. We're going to skip the Genesis. Don't start with the Sega Saturn either. That one is so expensive, especially if you're only collecting American games. The caveat to the Saturn is that it is pretty affordable if you want to import stuff from Japan, and it's pretty easy to play Japanese games even on an American Saturn. Anyone could figure it out. That being said, I assume the average person new to the hobby doesn't want to get a bunch of import stuff. If you do, the Saturn's a very legit way to do that. There are some other legit ways to do that we can get into in another video. But for just general collecting, as cool as the Saturn is, it is extremely expensive. Now I'd say the Dreamcast is kind of similar to the GameCube. It has some unique issues to itself, but overall, main issue, too expensive. There's a lot of cool games on the Dreamcast. I'd say there's cooler games than even the GameCube has on the Dreamcast, but a lot of them are super expensive. And then also a lot of them are just ported to other consoles. A lot of the huge heavy hitters you'd want to play. Obviously there are tons of amazing games stuck on the Dreamcast, but Shenmue, Crazy Taxi, Sonic Adventure, Sega Bass Fishing, Skies of Arcadia, Grandia, like tons of the Dreamcast games that are legendary and that people should play have been ported to other consoles and are very accessible on other consoles. That being said, the Dreamcast is so cool. It has one of the coolest vibes out of every console. If you are down, if you understand the drawbacks, I'm not going to hate on the Dreamcast. Like, it's so awesome. Like I said, I love all these consoles, but I really love the Dreamcast. It is very cool. Next up is the Game Gear. Honestly, Game Gear games, pretty cheap. They're not, I'm sure there's some expensive ones. I'm not that in deep into my Game Gear collecting life yet to know all the prices. But generally, Game Gear games are pretty cheap. The issue with the Game Gear is the same one with the OG Xbox. It's just the hardware. First off, you kind of need, even if you get a working Game Gear, you kind of need to mod it just because that screen, you can't do it in modern day. You just can't. As much as you'd like to go back to something like that, it's not backlit. It does have color, which is nice, but it's a tiny screen. It takes like 6 batteries at a time and doesn't last for that long. You really need to refurbish a Game Gear to make it playable, and the average person is not going to just randomly come across a refurbished Game Gear or know how to do that. So yeah, avoid the Game Gear. And then lastly is the Genesis. I saved this one for last because out of all of them, it's the one you should collect for. I'd say it's definitely the most affordable, but it does have just kind of a slightly toned down issue of the Master System, where it's not you're paying $50 for an 8-bit game, you're paying $30 to $50 for a 16-bit game. The Genesis is super cool. Sega is super awesome. I'd say if you're going to take the Sega journey, the Genesis is kind of the obvious way to start. But overall, I wouldn't say any Sega console is that great to collect for if you're starting out. I'd also say they're not very exciting. Besides the Genesis, you're only going to find a couple like Master System or Dreamcast or even no Saturn games. So like going out and collecting, it's not going to be a satisfying experience if you're just looking for Sega stuff, because there's usually not that much aside from the Genesis. I was iffy on including it, but I think I am, and that's the 3DS. And that's because it is kind of just verging on being too expensive to collect for. Also, the hardware itself, like 3DSs, are probably the most expensive part of this. And also, the 3DS, as much as I love its library, it is pretty limited. It's a lot of like first-party Nintendo stuff and then like JRPGs, and outside of that, you're not gonna find that much. A lot of the truly cool and unique JRPGs also on the 3DS have either been ported or are super expensive. Before we get into the last one, I also just want to point out, since this is targeted at new people, I'm not going over like obscure consoles. So like obviously the Neo Geo Pocket Color is expensive to collect for, and it's just a little handheld. But if you're new to the hobby, you probably don't even know what that is. So the final one for this video, and I've saved it for last because honestly, I don't even really mean it, is the Xbox 360. And it's August 2024. In a few months, this is probably gonna be completely different. But just right now, 360 prices are super inflated because with the arcade closing down, everyone decided to generate a bunch of FOMO around that and be like, oh, in a week, 360 games are going to just disappear. If you have them, they're going to turn into dust and they're going to be gone. So buy them now. And that's why they're all expensive, and everyone's surprised that they're all like $70 now. So like I said, in a few weeks, people are going to realize that's all bogus and they'll go back down. Maybe not completely go back down, but they'll go back down a considerable amount to their regular prices, and you can collect for 360 again. But do not buy 360 games right now. If you're doing that, you're making a bad choice. Just wait a year and they'll be normal priced again. One I want to add on to this video that is maybe less of a strong disclaimer than the other ones is the Wii U. It's very similar to the GameCube, just cheaper. What I mean by that is it has a small, pretty limited library. The few cool games it does have are just like Nintendo first-party games. The Wii U has less than the GameCube, especially because most of its first-party Nintendo games have been ported onto the Switch. And yeah, there's legitimately, like, I could probably count on both hands the amount of Wii U exclusives that still exist, and I could probably count on a couple fingers how many Wii U exclusives are actually worth playing. So yeah, it's not expensive. You can afford collecting for the Wii U if you're super passionate about the Wii U, which I know there's a there's a group of people out there that are. I wouldn't say avoid it, but it's pretty hard to get passionate about the Wii U is my main point here. So yeah, as always, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Let me know what I should talk about in the future, and yeah, have a nice life.